In 1989, The Cure was a veteran band, kicking around since the late 70s and steadily building steam, most notably with their top 40 hit Just Like Heaven. Disintegration, their follow-up album, reveled in the dark sounds of The Cure while delivering the number 2 hit Love Song. The semi-goth image and alternative rock sounds did nothing to stop this record from being a commercial success. I finally had the opportunity to see The Cure, still headed by a somewhat thicker Robert Smith this month at Madison Square Garden, so I thought what better opportunity to do a deep dive on their most acclaimed album. So, travel with us to that halcyon moment of British dominance on the alternative airwaves before the great triumph of grunge. Mix up some vodka, triple sec, and lime juice, and join us for episode 80 of Toasting the Classics, Disintegration by The Cure. Welcome to Toasting the Classics, the podcast where we take something that people call a classic and we talk about it while we drink something inspired by the classic. In this case, I think that I have done a terrible job of choosing the drink related to this classic because I don't know if it would have worked. But after we came up with the drink, I was thinking to myself, we should have just done some great hangover cure. Something that was like when people do the hair of the dog kind of hangover cure, which, by the way, I've never resorted to the hair of the dog. And the day that I do is the day I start worrying about how much I drink. I'm sure there must be something out there where you have like a Bloody Mary would have been good as like people drink those in the morning in New Orleans
as the cure.
As the cure, right? Because this show that we're doing today is going to be The Cure. We're talking about The Cure and specifically the 1989 album Disintegration. It was my choice for free choice, and I was inspired. We were actually originally going to do an album of Richard Pryor's, which we're still going to do because that's a great idea. I think we should still. Next time free choice comes around to me, I promise the Toasting the Classics listeners that we'll be talking about Richard Pryor. But this time, my wife bought me early birthday present, June 26th, I think it is. We're going to go see The Cure at Madison Square Garden. And I've never seen them, so I'm pretty excited about that. And I wanted to have an excuse to sort of get into their back discography and do some reading about the band and stuff. So I thought that'd be fun. Maybe it would have been smarter to go to the show first and then talk about it on Toasting the Classics. But I don't know. Is that necessary? But maybe that would have been cool. Maybe this one won't come out until actually I've been to the show, and I'll throw something into the outro talking about whether or not the show was great and how Robert Smith, how bad he looks as an old man or something. I don't know. But anyway, we'll see how the show goes. How are you doing today, Clint?
I'm good. Oh, by the way, what's your name?
My name's Dave McArthur.
My name is Clint Lanier. Welcome to Toasting the Classics. You just jumped right into it. You're so excited about this.
I did. I really was going off. That's probably a record for how much time I've spent talking. Although I have to say, when I scan through the shows just before posting them to make sure there's no like errors or anything in the middle, I click on it, and if I click at a random point, it seems like it's always me talking when I click to a random point. So I don't know if there's somebody out there who's a listener who wants to break it down by how much we talk, but I'm a little bit of a talker. So
really, I hadn't noticed.
No.
Well, if I had to do a lot of work, I wouldn't be doing this thing. So I'm allergic to work after all. Yeah, this is a great choice, Disintegration. So Disintegration came out in 1989. It was their biggest or I should say most popular, most lucrative album. Prior to this, geez, I think they had like 6 albums.
This is their number. This is their 8th album.
8th album. Wow. Okay. So they had 7 albums prior to Disintegration.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they kept moving up the charts. I mean, if you look at sort of they were formed, I want to say 76, 78.
I think 78 when they first got together. That sounds about right to me.
They came out with their first album, Three Imaginary Boys, 1979, 17 Seconds, 1980, and on, and Pornography, 82. And they just kind of kept climbing the charts.
And they're pretty prolific. I mean, these albums are coming out with not a lot of space in between. So,
well, 1 or 2, maybe 3 years. Well, we'll see. Yeah. First one, Imaginary Boys, 79, 17 Seconds, 1980. Then you had Pornography, 82. Standing on a Beach, 86.
I guess that was pretty normal back in those days, right? And it's kind of weird to think that The Cure goes back into the 70s. It makes sense thematically with the kind of music they are, because that's when the post-punk, that's basically when post-punk was born, is 1978. Right. 77 is the big year for punk, right? With Sex Pistols. And then almost immediately when Johnny Rotten, when they break up, Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious dies. and punk just crashes almost immediately. And you get this post-punk wave, which turns into a bunch of different things. Not really The Cure, but kind of. They're very inspired by Joy Division, I would say. And Joy Division's 100% one of the first wave of post-punk. I think that it does make sense that they're from 78, but like obviously I was a baby. Obviously I didn't know anything about it. But I did know the song Just Like Heaven and the album Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. I was aware of that, and I was 10. So I mean they were big in America in 1986, 1987, something like that. They were not some obscure band. Maybe not as big as U2, but kind of like that. Sort of an alternative British type band that was actually big in the States that people knew.
Yeah, and I sort of had them and I think a lot of people sort of had them as a novelty band because of their goth shtick,
because of the look,
right?
Yeah.
Robert Smith especially. I mean, he's the front man for this band, and he comes out and he looks like, I was about to say he looks like Tim Burton, but I guess Tim Burton looks like him.
Tim Burton looks like him. Yeah, that's the thing.
He's got red lipstick. He's got, pale makeup. I don't even know what you call it. Dark eyeliner, so like super shadowed eyeliner, and then like dyed black hair that's standing all crazy, and then dresses in black.
So if you're a person who doesn't know Robert Smith out there in the world listening to this podcast, and you're trying to think of what this look is we're talking about, you could picture The Crow, you could picture Edward Scissorhands.
Yep.
You could picture there's another big one that is slipping. The character from The Sandman, right? If you've seen any of those, you've seen things that were inspired by Robert Smith's look.
If you've seen any Tim Burton movie, which is like Nightmare Before Christmas or Frankenweenie, and
there's some synergy. There's synergy between those two things, and
for sure,
I think The Cure is uncomfortable with being called goth, but they were so early in the goth thing. They were in the same spheres as all the people that became goth later.
Yeah.
That they almost, his look and everything kind of created the sound and the look of goth, even though they're not really a part of that movement.
I mean, they didn't set out to be that. I mean, that was the thing is The Cure, they just set out to be punk or post-punk or new wave even,
Yeah.
And like, I think Depeche Mode, check me on this, but I think Depeche Mode maybe was like 1980, 1981, something like that.
So Depeche Mode became Depeche Mode. Oh no, I'm getting it mixed up. I'm sorry. New Order became New Order when Ian Curtis of Joy Division died. They basically are Joy Division that converted into a different band. And then Depeche Mode's very similar. So New Order and Depeche Mode are like early 80s synth pop. And kind of the Venn diagram between them and The Cure and goth, there's definitely some crossover. It's all the post-punk. It's all the post-punk movement essentially in a lot of ways.
Right. So what makes goth? I mean, I guess you could say there's the look, but there's also the attitude, and the attitude is this kind of nihilistic or nihilistic, however you pronounce it. Kind of.
I think either is fair. I might have gone with nihilistic, but
nihilistic attitude towards life. Where it's everything sucks and we're all going to die.
We are nihilists.
By that measure, Morrissey and the Smiths would be goth, right?
But though he's come into the game like late compared to Robert Smith and Susie and the Banshees.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah. No,
I'm not even really get together until 84 or 85. Yeah, it's very different. Although I think he and Robert Smith are very simpatico. I think they kind of saw.
I would say so. I mean, like every day is like
literate.
You've got every day is like Sunday,
right?
And where he's like, "Come nuclear bomb," just get it over with. And Robert Smith was never really like that. He didn't set out to be that. He had a kind of a dark phase in the early 80s, and he admits that. He's like, I was just in a bad place, and this, I was writing the music. And so Robert Smith was sort of the guy that wrote everything, all the songs, all the music. I mean, they sort of contributed, but I mean, for the most part, it was him pushing the ship, and in the directions anyway.
Did you say pushing the ship?
Ship, yes.
Okay,
pushing the ship.
I won't need to bleep that. They had to get their ship together.
Yeah, they had to get their ship together, but he was pushing the ship in the direction that took them to the goth.
And this album,
area.
I think this album is another dark phase of his. Apparently, he had kind of an existential crisis as he got towards 30. This album, is it dark? It's darker than Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me.
Yeah,
but it's not really dark per se. It's not like the album, Suicide from 10 years before a long time before this, but it's what is the word I'm looking for? It's got a gothic atmosphere to it, sort of. It's got it's very minor keyed. It's very ambient. You could
It's
definitely
very,
put it on and
yeah,
have like a mood, you know. It's not
it's very,
necessarily
well, I think morose is a good word for it.
morose, maybe, yeah.
It's sort of like, it's a bit of a downer. If you hear
Kind
all
of
the, like,
Byronic.
well, all the chords are in kind of that downer type
Uh-huh.
of key. I mean, nothing's very upbeat.
There's this German romantic painting from
Mhm.
the 1800s, and I think it's Caspar David Friedrich or Friedrich David. I can't remember the artist's name, but it's this guy dressed in like a Byronic fashion, standing on a cliff with a big wave behind him. And to me, that represents the romantic movement. And it
Mhm.
also is part of what's going on in the Smiths and going on in
Yeah,
the Cure and things like that. It has that album could be playing in that guy's earbuds
yeah,
while he's watching that wave crash, and it
yeah.
would be perfect. It's like dramatic and kind of nihilist and kind of morose,
Mhm.
but maybe also enjoying the sensation. Like not
Mhm.
just being morose, but being like, oh, look at this beautiful, scary world in front of me. I don't know. It's a richer feeling than just being morose. You know, it's not just walking around in black makeup and being a goth is kind of, you know, like a Lydia in Beetlejuice
Yeah, Beetlejuice. Yeah,
at the beginning of Beetlejuice is
again.
kind of whack, you know. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's easily lampooned, right? Like it's kind of a
Yes, yes.
funny thing, but
Well, I think that was his fear. He didn't want to be that because he didn't want to be identified really as sort of that. But I mean,
right.
you know, if you think about it, and this is really stupid, and I might be stretching it a little bit, but
Let's do it.
yeah,
It's the
okay,
overwrought theory of the
all
week, and
right.
it's coming from Clint for once.
Johnny
All right.
Cash wore nothing but black
Uh-huh.
when he reemerged from addiction.
He was
He
like
was
the
the man.
world's first goth.
He was the man in black. Maybe
Yeah.
he sung "Sunday Morning Coming Down" by Christopherson, which
Uh-huh.
I just said every day is like Sunday. He sings about Ira Hayes. It was the
Okay.
song of Ira Hayes,
Okay.
and he was the guy that a Native American who was raising the flag in Iwo Jima, and he sang a song about him and basically how Ira Hayes ended up. His life was a tragedy after that. You know, even though he was kind of stylized in the
Yeah.
raising of the flag in Iwo Jima. So I mean, he sang about these very dark, depressing, terrible things, but he did it as a social activist. I mean, Johnny Cash was very much a social activist, and he did it to shine a light on the wealth gap or the poverty or you know
Yeah,
all these other kind of social injustices.
that's like
Dressing in black and all this other stuff.
I think you're totally right. I think Johnny Cash is definitely in the same sort of mood as the Cure or some of, you know, like you said, like the Smiths or whatever.
Mhm.
But it's more like Bruce Springsteen because, like you said, it's got this political message
Yeah,
and it asks
yeah,
you to do
maybe.
something about it. Whereas the British ones are
Yeah,
more like it's kind of nihilistic. It's like
yeah.
whatever,
Girlfriend in a
girlfriend in
coma.
a coma, you know.
Yeah. And so the point of all of this, I guess, is the Smiths just sort of accident, or not the Smiths, I'm sorry, the Cure
Cure,
just
yeah,
sort
be
of
careful.
accidentally stumbled into this and this post-punk. I mean, because they were influenced by punk and they definitely wanted to be that.
Oh yeah,
And
I mean, he was
and
talking about the moment he saw the Sex Pistols
it
on
was a
BBC, just
life-changing
on
event for
John
him.
Peel, has transformed
Yeah.
his life, and I could
Yeah.
imagine that. To me, that's like the moment I first heard Nirvana. It
Hmm.
was just
Yeah.
like I remember
Yeah.
it, like, you know, and obviously that didn't inspire me to become a musician, but it did
Yeah.
kind of seem to change my life and the way I saw the world in a weird sort of way. And
Well, if you were already a musician, which he was, you know, and you already
yeah,
had a band, which he did, because his first
right.
band was like 72 or something like that, or
If I
75.
had been a musician, Nirvana would have changed everything about my
Yes.
life. It changed the
Yeah.
way I thought, and I was not a musician. I just loved music.
Right.
But if I had been a musician, I couldn't have done things the same the day after. I was looking at actually, not to get into that too much. I feel like I talk about Star Wars and Nirvana too much, but you know, so soon. I was looking at the list of like big albums from '89, right?
Hmm.
And you can see there's some weird things. There's some holdovers. There's Phil Collins, right?
Okay.
Don Henley had a big album in 1989.
Okay.
Madonna had a big album in 1989, right?
Okay.
Then you've got some of the things like Motley Crue had a
Hmm.
huge album in 1989. And meanwhile, Motley Crue is that, you know, they're these big heavy metal bands, these big
Mhm.
dinosaurs stomping around the musical landscape.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Nirvana releases their first album, Bleached, in 89,
Yeah.
right? Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine comes out in 1989. You've got Doolittle by the Pixies. You've got Soundgarden's first album, Mother's Milk by Red Hot Chili Peppers. You got all these little rats running around underneath the feet of the dinosaurs ready to take over. And it's
Yeah.
when Nevermind hits in 91, that's the asteroid that killed off all these,
Blows it.
you
Yeah.
know,
Blows it
yeah.
all open. Yeah.
And everything is
Interesting.
just completely different. So
Interesting. Yeah.
it's a good music year. I was looking at the list, and what I noticed is that out of 100 albums that people were ranking as great albums, there's hardly any rap. Rap has really kind of not arrived yet. Out of the 5 or 6 rap albums on that list, Vanilla Ice is one of them, for God's sake.
I think Chronic in '92, which we have done. You guys should go
later,
listen to that.
I think Chronic in '92 was where things really changed.
Yeah,
I think that was
sort of broke open. So on that list, where was this album?
Number 5.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Number 5 on this list.
Interesting.
And it was either 4 or 5 on a couple different lists out of 100 I'm talking about.
Yeah.
One list put De La Soul number 1, I think, because they probably looked at the list and they were like, wait, where's hip hop's about to get huge? Where is all the hip hop?
Yeah, right.
Which is fair enough. I had the same thought too, but I don't know if De La Soul's, maybe I didn't catch that. That was a little hip for me in 1989. I was in 6th grade.
A lot of people talk about, not a lot of people, but some critics discuss The Cure as one of the first alternative bands before there was such kind of a thing.
I think that's fair.
And I think it's fair too. And I think it's more fair than saying goth. I think goth is just saying, okay, because they look this way and they have kind of depressing or sad sounds sometimes. Let's just throw them in this thing.
So the Cure becomes really
is probably a lot more valid than
I think the alternative label is a lot more valid. But the Cure becomes really prominent in '87, I think, with Just Like Heaven.
Yeah,
I think was like all over the place. Like you couldn't not hear that song.
Right, but what's funny is the
band I think of before that is Tears for Fears.
Tears
for Fears is really big in 1984, and how is that not an alternative band? That's an alternative band. They don't really have any of the punk influence that the Cure does, though. So it's a little different. There's no edge to Tears for Fears, but that was a big band that kind of had some of that same synth pop. I don't know. There was always that Depeche Mode stuff floating around, New Order and things like that. I don't know if that really alternative is that's not really an alternative rock band. They're more like something else. And alternative rock bands. What about U2? Does that count as alternative rock? It's not metal. It really wasn't what everybody was doing.
I got in this discussion with my daughter who's really into music, and it's like, how do you classify alternative rock? It's everything that's not like classic rock. Alternative rock, the label came out in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And so you had the hair bands. You had Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and Cinderella, and
definitely not alternative. I think
and so it was somebody other than that. I think it was basically an attitude as well as music. So the Pixies, everybody would say alternative, right? Because they were weird. They didn't just have really cool different music, but they were weird. They were weird.
Do you want my quick litmus test for alternative rock?
Sure.
Are you all about girls and drugs? If you're not, you're alternative rock. If you're talking about anything else other than girls and drugs, because you think about all those metal bands.
But I don't know. Bruce Springsteen isn't like girls and drugs.
He's classic rock. He's kind of before this. Like 84, we talked about Born in the USA, and by 84, he's kind of an elder statesman of rock, right? He's still respected. He's still good, but he's kind of an old guy. He's really big in the 70s. If you're in the 80s and you're like in your 20s,
I guess I just hate to put U2 in.
I think angst is part of it.
Angst might have something to do. I hate putting U2 into alternative rock.
I know.
I think it has to do with.
It doesn't seem right, but what the heck
with being countercurrent to what was out there. Like Frank Black and the Pixies did that. Nirvana, going off the influence of the Pixies, did that. The Cure just did their own thing. They didn't care about what other people were doing. I think UK rock is a little bit different. It's such a small kind of pond,
It's different. It's definitely different. That's for sure.
And so they just sort of did what they wanted to do. The Beatles sort of did that too. I mean, the Beatles, Rubber Soul, Revolver. Once they were famous, they
started out as a boy band. They might as well.
They did. But then they grew beyond that, and they became what you would call kind of alternative in that day, right? Influence that allowed other bands to do that because they were able to do that, and they had so much juice in the industry that they could get away with it.
I don't think you can be alternative if you're prog rock, even though Queen definitely feels kind of. It's certainly alternative, right? It's not.
Queen's almost like novelty rock, Fat Bottom Girls and all the rest.
Well, those are like silly ones, but I mean, Queen's overall work is very. I don't know. It's just weird. Queen. There's nothing like Queen.
Well, no, there's
perfectly honest. Queen is just sui generis. There's nothing else like Queen. I've never.
Like I said, they're sort of they're novelty.
They're novel in that sense. They're not novel like a novelty in a sense of Weird Al Yankovic, but.
No, I'm not saying silly. I'm not saying silly. I'm just saying like they're all one-offs almost, Bohemian Rhapsody. How would you classify that? Nobody else has done that or would ever do that,
The fact that Queen is unquestionably a rock band because of the instruments that they use, right? The way they
Mm-hmm.
dress. Unquestionably, they're a rock band. And then the fact that they're not doing standard 4/4 measure songs makes them prog rock, because anything you do other than that is prog rock, basically. So I think if you use electric guitar and the standard 4-piece band, then you're pretty much rock. So The Cure is rock, but they're coming out of something very different. And a different lineage. To me, to get back a little bit more to talking about The Cure, the band that's really goth and started goth to me is Susie and the Banshees. Like when I think of goth and the image of goth and what they look like, and I think Robert Smith, because he was part of that band for part of their years, his look kind of comes from Susie, and his behavior is kind of modeled on how Susie would act in front of the crowd. So I think they're pretty important in goth, and then I kind of leave the goth river going into the 80s when it gets pretty weird and dark. I never really got into Sisters of Mercy and things like that. Like that's a bit much.
Well, they can get really weird. How about Gwar? What's Gwar?
Oh my God! Now there's a novelty act. Gwar's a novelty act. Gwar's a novelty.
Well, that's when you take it as far as it could possibly go, right?
Yeah.
Cutting off heads and fake blood and all the rest of the weird stuff.
I mean, they're a metal. Obviously, they're metal, but they're like a joke on metal, kind of.
Yes.
I mean, not kind of. Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't really, that was not something that ever appealed to me. I had friends that were into Gwar and would go to Gwar shows, and I was just like, oh, right.
But I'll say this, like getting back to what we're talking about, The Cure. You look at Robert Smith, you say, okay, they're a goth band, but then they come out with Just Like Heaven. Just Like Heaven, to me, is probably one of the best songs ever written. So when I was in high school, one of our pastimes was to go across the border into Mexico.
Okay.
And party.
You
could drink.
Nice.
You could drink at 18 years old in Mexico, which meant that I can give them my ID that said I'm 16 and a $5 bill, and I can go drink in Mexico.
Nice,
nice. Which I couldn't do here. But that song would play endlessly in the clubs down there. So that song came out in like 87, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So we were going in from 90 to 92. And it was playing all the time. And so every time I hear that song, which it's a fantastic song. It's one of the greatest melodies.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I think all of my life,
every time I hear it, it reminds me.
I hear that song once every 3 or 4 years, and I'm like, man, I think that's one of my favorite songs ever. Like, I just really love that song. And then I forget about it. I'm like, oh,
right.
Yeah. And then I hear it again. It's kind of like it's not like this anymore, but it used to be. I would hear Don't Stop Believing once every 3 or 4 years, and I would just be like, oh, that's a phenomenal song. And then after the Sopranos thing, that one was just it was more saturated in the culture than it was when it originally came out. And I wouldn't listen to that one anymore. But
I just looked it up, and this is the thing that was surprising to me, was that Just Like Heaven reached number 40.
Right.
That's as far as it got. Number 40, and Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. It just blows me away because it's such a great song.
It really is a great song.
I don't know, maybe it was just
but it paved the way. It paved the way for this one, and this one, Love Song, hit number 2 in the U.S.
Love Song Love Song is such an amazing song, isn't it?
It's really good. I actually did a head-to-head because I was looking at it and I was like, which one do I like more? And I did a head-to-head between those two songs, listened to them back to back, and then I played them on guitar for myself back to back. And I was like, I like Just Like Heaven more, but Love Song's a good song. That's a really good. I think I don't even know if it's necessarily my favorite one on this album, but it's a really good song, and it's definitely. I could see why that's the big hit. It made sense.
So Disintegration had, like, of the songs, of the singles, they had Love Song, Pictures of You,
right,
Fascination Street, Spider-Man.
That's called something else.
It's called something else. But it's Spider-Man's Having Me for Dinner Tonight.
Yeah, that's called. That's later in the album. Is that just on Fascination Street, right?
Spider-Man is having me for dinner tonight.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. It's later in the album, and it's Lullaby, right? Yep, it's Lullaby.
Pictures of You, Love Song, yep. So those four are four of their best songs ever, and it's so loaded with those amazing songs. And I will say this, so I have The Cure Greatest Hits, which is it's like 20 songs, I can't remember, but it spans their career. And we listen to it. Me and the family listen to it every time we go on road trips, because we try to get these kind of greatest hits albums, and just they took up a good hour and a half, right?
Yeah, sure.
When I listen to it on Disintegration on the album, it's a totally different song. Actually, all four of those songs completely different than what you get on like the greatest hits. They're longer. They're a lot more subtle, a little bit more nuanced insofar as you hear a lot of different instruments, which you don't hear on the greatest hits.
Do you know the song?
It was really cool.
You know the song "Boys Don't Cry"?
Yes.
So it's got that bit that's like dun 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 dun, and it always sounded to me like they didn't write the song right, like they missed the beat on that part. And it's so funny because I realized that's actually one of their first songs they ever did together. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think they were actually as technically competent when they wrote that. It's a good song, but you can hear there's like it's like when Mick Jagger can't hit the note at the beginning of Ruby Tuesday.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Every time I hear that song, I'm like, you couldn't do take two, Mick? Like, what?
Remind us how it goes. It's like
he's like when he's like, never say where she came from.
That's terrible.
It's awful. And Boys Don't Cry used to do the same thing. It was like dun 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 dun. Dun, dun. Yeah, the beat's off or something.
Yeah. It has that stutter or that like hesitation.
It has that stutter. Exactly. There's like somebody dropped the ball there. Like the guy leaning on the keyboard at the beginning of Roxanne, and you hear like somebody goes and then sing.
And then it goes into it. This particular album and this particular band, I think, are really important for the 80s. It's just, if you're an 80s kid, you're a Gen Xer, you will have heard them on the radio or in clubs.
So here's something when you said about the 80s, this is something I wanted to talk about. See what you think of this statement that I'm making here. I don't think people care about decades anymore. And I remember when I was a little kid, I was thinking, okay, so this is the 80s, and then it's going to be the 90s, and then what are we even going to call that next one? And then it's the teens. And I remember thinking, I wonder if people are going to think of them as decades the way they used to. And sure enough, as we're living through the 21st century, this is the first one that's got a proper name, and we're living in the 20s.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, and I don't know about everybody else, but when I hear the 20s, the 20s is the 1920s. Like that's the first decade in history that was that decade, right? Like where people would talk about it and they'd be like the 20s.
Well, I think you need to decades demand retrospection. You need to be able to look back on them.
In a way, but this is kind of what I'm getting at here with this argument, is that I think in the second half of the 20th century, people would have this awareness. This is 1969 and now it's 70 and everything needs to change because now it's the 70s. And then everybody was like, it's 1979 and it's 1980.
No, you're right.
Needs to change because now it's the 80s, And so
I think you were right on certain things. If you look at like hairstyles between the 60s and 70s, night and day, right? 70s and 80s, night and day. 80s and 90s, night and day.
Yeah. And but people would say that. They'd be like, come on, Mom, it's the 70s. Come on, Mom, it's the 90s. Yeah, exactly. What are you doing? Nobody talks that way anymore.
I just know that from my 16-year-old daughter, she would be offended if you called her a millennial. She is not a millennial. She's like, I'm a Gen Zer. Generation Zoom or whatever she calls her, a Zoomer.
Whatever the heck it is. Right. We talk about generations more than anything else.
And so she's offended by it. But she remembers, like, she loves to go back. So she was born in 2006. She loves to go back and look at like the late 2000s or 2010s, I guess, whatever you call them, because she can remember that. And then the 2010s, because she can remember that. And she could be like, can you believe we did this and we did that? Like, she owns it.
People are still nostalgic, but the very fact that we don't have a name for those 2 decades makes them harder to talk about. It's like the power of names.
I don't know.
It's like,
I don't know.
Somebody was talking to me.
But I mean, do you remember Stanford and Son?
Sure.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna zoom in live time here. How old was Red Fox in Stanford and Son? Okay, this is gonna blow you away. So that was it had Red Fox, comedian, African American comedian, very famous, and it was about he and his son who owned this scrap shop, and they would go around LA and like find junk on the street, bring it back, and then sell it and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So Red Fox played an old man. I'm coming, Betty. When he'd always act like he's going to have a heart attack.
I was trying to remember what his wife's name was.
Estelle or something.
No, I can't. I don't know. I was gonna say the quote, and then I was like, I can't remember what her name is.
Whatever it was. I'm coming. He's about to have a heart attack, and his son's like, Dad, would you knock it off? It wasn't easy.
What?
He was 49 years old. 49 years old the first season. Okay.
Wow.
And we thought he was ancient.
Yeah.
I remember watching that show.
His
in the
hair's
70s.
all gray and stuff, right? I mean, he has his hair gray.
But the point is, that's what they were, though. Old people were freaking old.
Speaking of which, what are you doing for your 50th? Are you doing something? Are you doing something?
Shut up. Yes, I am doing something. I'll tell you about it off.
Is it like a friend thing? Can I come?
Yeah,
Is it going to be like a party?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I'll tell you off air. No,
let's invite the Toasting the Classics listeners.
But the point is, like, I'm 50 years old.
Yeah.
I'm lifting weights. I'm hiking every day, and I could pass as
2015,
15 something. I could pass as a lot younger. But Red Fox is 49 years old, and we thought he was 80. We thought he was Joe Biden on that show.
Right. Do you know how I know I can't pass for 20 anything anymore?
What's that?
It's because of how fast young people call me sir.
I know.
Everywhere I go. Every time somebody's like, "Oh, sir," I'm like, "God damn it. I feel young."
I haven't been carded in so long.
I got carded at Yankee Stadium. I got carded at Yankee Stadium.
Shut up. I hate you. You know what? Why do I talk to you? Why?
But they were just messing with me. They didn't actually think I was 20 years old. I mean, I've got a kid who's been able to drink for 2 years.
But I will say this: it's actually it's sort of convenient because they just look at you and they're like, whatever. So it is sort of convenient, but at the same time, it's a bit depressing. I'm in that sweet spot where I haven't quite accepted it. Yeah. In any case, let's move on.
That sweet spot called denial. I
will say Robert Smith at 64 years old looks really old.
He looks terrible.
He looks terrible.
I don't know that he actually looks that old, but when he puts on the makeup and does the hair, he looks like somebody's Aunt Myrtle is what he looks like. He does not look like a cool
according to him, that's how he dresses every day, which I think is a very startling thing to admit. Tim Burton looks terrible too. Robert Smith is 64 years old. Tim Burton.
Yeah, I'm going to see him in a couple weeks here. I guess.
I hope he didn't break a hip. Tim Burton, 64 years old. He looks terrible too. I think there's something in with dyeing your hair and lifting it poofy, and smearing on white makeup that might have something.
Nobody looks good in their 60s, for Christ's sake. Like, what are you going to do? Like,
are you kidding me?
That's not, what are you going to do? You can keep it together for a little while, but by 60, you're an old person, like you could be like, you could be
60's a new 58.
You could be a healthy 60, but nobody's like, oh yeah, like look at that 60-year-old go by.
If you were 60 years old and you show up at the Villages in Florida, you would be the toast of the town, man.
I would be. Yes, I would be. That's
you would be. That's and apparently you have to hang some sponges out of your window or those squeegees or something like that. Go look it up, ladies and gentlemen.
What the hell does that mean? All right, well,
just don't worry about it. Alex, put on
Shady Pines, Clint.
Yeah, there you go.
Shady Pines. We were talking about Fascination Street. Great bass line to start out.
I know.
Really great bass line. There's these songs, and for me, The Cure in general is not one of these bands where you're like, we were talking about Queen. Queen songs are singular. Each Queen song is nothing like the other Queen song that you like. You never have any trouble remembering which song. The Cure has a very powerful voice, and each song sounds a lot like the other songs. It's kind of hard to separate them. Like we were just talking about, which one is Lullaby? Which one is Fascination Street? I actually have to sing through because the instrumentation is very similar. You got all these minor chords. The guitar has a certain jangle to it that I just love. The sound, the way they do their guitars, but it sounds the same in every song. There's definitely there's a distinctive thing, but it's hard to tell the songs apart.
Well, they layer it, and the best example of that really is Just Like Heaven. When the song starts, you've got 5 different layers of stuff that kick in at different times. So you've got acoustic, and then you've got not acoustic, but you've got and then you get the bass, and then you get the drums. Actually, it starts with the drum, and then the bass, and then it's between the guitar and then the keyboards, and then everything hits it, and then everything blends together, and it's
wall of noise is what you call it.
It's amazing.
This album starts out with Plain Song.
Song is huge.
It's big, huge wall of sound.
It's ginormous. Yeah,
we talked about it in Pet Sounds. It's Phil Spector and the wall.
Phil Spector, yeah.
And Susie and the Banshees called it the wall of noise, and it's totally what they're doing. This album opens with this gigantic wall of noise.
But then Pictures of You though it does that layering thing again, where it starts out with like, I think
Pictures of You sounds a lot like Just Like Heaven. It's very
Pictures
similar.
of You. Well, Pictures of You starts out with the guitar.
Yeah.
And then it layers things through it, and it's never huge. They're the masters of doing that sort of layering sounds where one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
There's that great line in Just Like Heaven where I think it starts off with the guitars like and then it hits it, then it turns into the keyboard doing the same thing. But it starts off with the guitar, leads into the keyboard doing, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, no, they're all working together. It's very symphonic. It's a whole, it creates a whole. And that's why I think it's a little harder to distinguish the songs sometimes, because it's a little, if you ask me which of Beethoven's symphonies does this one song come from, I'm like, well, I freaking know the song, but I don't know. I can't remember which
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
There's a distinctive sound to the whole thing, and it comes together as a whole, and it can be kind of difficult to remember which one you're listening to. But this one, I think, is all of the Cure's things they do coming together. And I think it's better as a whole album. There's great songs on it, but a lot of the other songs are kind of, like they're kind of not filler. Plain Song, for example, is very distinctively the Cure. You're listening to the Cure,
right?
But it's not like a song. You're not like whistling along to it,
right?
Like I got out my guitar for the last couple of tracks on the album just because I was getting a little bit, if I'm being honest, I was a little bored. But I was digging the vibe, so I got on my guitar and played along, and I was like, I can play along with this, but it's pretty much just a 4-chord progression all through those last 2 songs, different ones, but it's a pretty simple progression. But there's this huge thing going on with all the instruments and stuff that creates a larger sound that you could just sit back and listen to it and get a feeling out of it. And I think that's what a Cure album is about to me. Is
if you look at the track list from Disintegration, the ones that stand out are Pictures of You, Love Song, Lullaby, Fascination Street. Those don't sound like the other songs on the album. Okay, so that's 4 songs. So you've got 8 songs, but those 8 songs sound alike. Those songs sound alike. And they sound like kind of like formulaic The Cure. You know what I mean? They stand apart because they don't sound like formulaic The Cure.
It's almost like if you imagine a musical, right? And it's got a theme that's going to run through the whole. There's like a theme that's going to run through the whole musical, right? And so you're playing the stuff that's kind of thematically the whole thing, and then it stops for a big number, and you do a number, and then you go back to the theme, and then do another number, then back to the theme, and so it's like Plain Song opens up, and it's like the theme of Disintegration. It's what this album is. It's you feel the whole theme, and then it goes into Pictures of You, which is like its own song. And then back to something that sounds more like the theme with Close Down, then Love Song, and then you're back, and you go back and forth to sort of, it's almost like the ground state of the album.
I think you're right. Yeah,
it's a really influential album. There's a band called Interpol. I don't know how much you know them, but
Interpol.
I loved Interpol back in the day. Like some of my friends hung out with them here in New York and stuff like that. They were like before they got famous, and then I was really into them. And you could hear it. The guy was talking about how much they were influenced by The Cure. And as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I was thinking, what I kept hearing in it, and I actually can't remember what year this album came out, but I was thinking of the album. The band is called The Church. And they have this song called Under the Milky Way. Do you know the song I'm talking about? It's from like 1990. I do know that song, It's right about the same time as Disintegration. It's one of my favorite songs.
That's a great song. Also. Yeah, that's a great song.
And it's got the same kind of guitar going on throughout the song that's in this album. I think it's actually about a year after this. So I think it is inspired by this, but it's just a cool sound.
That's a good song.
And I think the title, Under the Milky Way, describes how I feel about this album. It's like you're sitting out there and the stars are all above you. And you feel small in this huge universe, but it's beautiful at the same time. Like the guy looking at the wave in the painting I was talking about. That's the feel of this album and this band to me.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Did anything surprise you about what you learned?
Before we do that, we haven't even talked about our drink. Sure. We didn't get to our drink.
Oh my God, we didn't mention it at all.
Yeah, let's do.
We mentioned that it was a terrible pick, but we didn't mention what it was.
So for the drink, you came up with you sent me one. So it's vodka, triple sec, and lemon juice. Or lime juice, rather.
Did you use lemon? It's fine. I don't think it would change it very much, but
I did use lemon actually.
Okay, all right. So we have two.
I didn't know the measurements, so I used 2 ounces of vodka, 1 of triple sec, and then half of.
So according to mine, it should have been equal parts lime and triple sec.
Oh, geez. Okay.
But
so a
it's
little bit
not a big,
less.
I don't think it's a big difference.
Okay. And it's okay. So why did you come up with this?
I was just Googling around trying to find something. Honestly, I was kind of scrambling to find a drink. And it would have been kind of fun to go with Bloody Mary. That would have been fun and call that the cure, right? I kind of wish I'd done that. But this was something that was served at a venue where the Cure did a big show not too long ago, because I think Robert Smith is on record as being a big fan of vodka. So they created a fun vodka cocktail and called it the Cure. So,
all right, well, that makes sense.
You know,
all right,
whatever.
Cool. Well, that makes sense.
That was, that's about it. But I did 1.5 ounces vodka to 1 ounce triple sec to 1 ounce lime juice. So my proportions are a little different. Should taste
almost close to it. Yeah, close to it.
That's about right.
It's good. It works. You know, it's like a, well, it's an orangey, lemony, citrusy.
And by the way, I realized my grand unifying theory of drink mixing was incorrect. I had somehow gotten the impression that the definition of highball was that you had 2 ingredients, and the definition of cocktail was 3 ingredients, and that's not right at all. I don't know where I got that idea. I've been saying that on the show, and I just wanted to get that out there. I don't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about either.
I think a highball is specifically with whiskey and something else, but anyway. So I don't know where
highball is just highball could be whiskey and soda. That's it.
It's just whiskey mixed with another ingredient.
Yeah, something else.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. But it has to be whiskey.
Cocktail is always a spirit, a bitter, and something sweet.
Okay, so there is a definition. All right.
So the original cocktail is what's called an old fashioned. It's like 1856 or something, or 1816 or something like that. In a newspaper, it was whiskey, bitters, and sugar water. So any combination of a spirit, bitter, and then sweet.
A sweet. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a cocktail.
Well, I'm going to put that out there. Anybody who's listening to these shows in order, which is nobody, I think people are just grabbing whatever they want to listen to. But anybody who's doing that, please be aware that I have corrected myself and I have learned. And
he has learned.
I want to apologize to the fans.
Yeah, he is.
Mistake.
He's apologetic, and he's learned. He's learned his lesson, and he's coming back a better person. All right. So surprises. My biggest surprise is that Robert Smith is the only member of the Cure.
So Simon Gallup has basically always been in the band. He's been in the band. So the band's been together since 78, which would be what? 32 plus 23, which is, that can't be right. That's not 45 years, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The band is basically 1 year younger than me. So they're 45 years old, and he's only been out of the band for 3 years, Simon Gallup. Robert Smith is the always in the band. That's true.
Yes.
But
so that's what I mean. It kind of blew me away. So you could have one person who is the band. There's this sort of intellectual or philosophical.
The ship of Theseus?
Mind puzzles. The ship of Theseus. What is it? What is
I like that. I like that.
What is that?
What a cool. So it's basically saying if the ship keeps. I don't know what it has to do with Theseus, honestly.
I don't know
but anyway,
either. But
the ship comes in and you fix a couple of boards and a couple of planks and basically over time every single piece of it has been replaced down to the very nail. So is the thing really still the ship of Theseus?
Right.
That's true of our bodies as well, by the way. Every single cell in your body is replaced within 10 years. I think I've heard. It's probably not true down to there's probably
that's the first thing I thought of is like
that's
okay. Is the Cure the Cure? Because you got one guy. Although I think in this case it would be because this, Robert Smith was there.
Robert Smith has never left.
Beginning, right?
Yeah.
Had he come in and replaced like the lead, a lead singer or something like after it was formed, then it would be really weird. But he came in. He didn't come in. He was there from the beginning. They called themselves the Cure. Everybody else left at one time or another. He stayed. Other people, other planks and so forth.
Yeah, I think
replaced. But I couldn't help thinking of that. It's so weird.
I like
it's
that.
Imagine if like Steve Tyler was Aerosmith, like all of Aerosmith.
I don't know anything about the history of Aerosmith. For all I know, that might be true.
Anybody, like basically Metallica really comes down to Lars and Hatfield. Well, just Lars, really. I think Lars is the only founding member of Metallica. Now that I think about it, so maybe it's
James
not
Hetfield, he wasn't there from the beginning.
I don't think so. I think they had another lead singer who died like in a bus accident or something.
That's pretty metal to die in a bus
pretty
accident.
metal. But anyway, that was my biggest surprise. If I had a sub surprise, it was again, and just pertaining to Robert Smith, how prolific this guy is. Like he's not just in The Cure, he's in Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah.
And then he collaborated like throughout the 80s and 90s with everybody in the entire world.
Yeah.
All these other bands and, co-writing and arranging and doing all this other stuff that
I was impressed with his influence. Icon's the wrong word. He's not strong enough to be an icon, but he kind of is. His image is so influential on so many other things that we associate with goth and kind of goth adjacent, like Tim Burton. It's not really goth, but it's goth-ish. Yeah. His influence on that really impressed me. Like I was like, yeah, that's right. He was dressing like that, and that's where Edward Scissorhands comes from. And that's pretty cool. Like this one guy, and I think he gets it from Susie. I think it really is Susie. I think Susie had a look, and he kind of copied Susie's look. And through him, probably because of misogyny, he was more influential. If you know what I mean? Maybe. Like probably people were like, oh, like look at that. This guy's wearing makeup. Because basically he just did exactly what she's doing and then mussed his hair up a little bit more. He looks so much like Ben Affleck, by the way, without the makeup when he was young.
Oh, I know.
There's a couple of pictures of him without his makeup, and I was like, that just looks exactly like Ben Affleck, which is, I'm thinking, Ben Affleck has had some trouble in his career. Maybe he should start wearing some makeup. Maybe he would finally get that big
maybe
hit
so
that he's deserved for so long. But
probably because not like he didn't have a hot wife to help him with his makeup.
Biggest surprise, my biggest surprise here was that he played guitar for Susie and the Banshees. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool because I also really like Susie and the Banshees. That's a band that I just always thought was cool. Everything about their look I found appealing. I like the weird sound. Actually, the first time I ever heard Susie and the Banshees was in Batman Returns. They play the song where Catwoman and Batman dance together. They play the Susie and the Banshee song in that scene. And then I went and got a couple of her albums after I heard that. And I was just, or their albums. And I was very impressed. Super cool. This was my pick. This is something that I'm going to see them. This is probably my favorite Cure album. I think this is their best album. I really like this band in general. There's a bunch of great songs. They're a bit to me like they're on the same brain cell kind of as REM, which is that I really, really like a bunch of their songs and I like some of their albums, but I don't know their albums from beginning to front the way I do with the Smiths and the Beatles. Like Smiths and Beatles, I could tell you what song goes into the next song, and I just would listen to the albums over and over again. These, I really dug the individual singles, but the albums weren't as powerful. Disintegration, I think, is my favorite Cure album, and so therefore I would toast it, but I'm putting it up to you, and I'm the one who selected it, so it's the ball's in your court.
This is gonna be kind of lame, but how can I not toast this? I think the Cure is fantastically.
You're talking about the Cure, or are you talking about this album?
This album. Well, hold on. The Cure itself is like themselves hugely influential. This particular album, I love this album. Love all the songs on it. I think it's interesting that this is their biggest hit or most popular hit here in the U.S. I think it was actually
honestly I think that Just Like Heaven opens the door to this album being a big hit.
I think I was just thinking that myself.
I don't think this album necessarily would have been such a. And by the way, Elektra didn't think it was a hit. Elektra heard the album and they wanted a couple more months. It was exactly what happened with OK Computer. Yeah, they heard it and they were like, "Ooh, we're gonna downplay sales estimates here."
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing though. Kiss Me. See, I always thought "Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me" was their biggest album in the U.S.
Yeah. No, I know because "Just Like Heaven" is a terrific
because it's just
song.
Like Heaven and
Apex,
a lot of other great songs there too. And then
not as many. If you go look at the track listing for "Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me,"
well,
there's not as many hits. Not as many hits. I disagree. I think there's some great. Not as many of the songs that you know by the Cure that you could sing along with.
Yes, I agree with that. But this one, if that opened the door for this one, I'm going to toast him. Yeah, I'm
all right,
just
cool.
Purely out of nostalgia because I respect the band. I love the band.
Cool. No, so, I think this one deserves it. This is a good album. My number 4, number 5 of 1989. I think it might be higher than that, but I think it's earned that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Pretty good music here, by the way. So
I think so.
Full Moon Fever by Tom Petty is another one that came out that same year.
Oh, really? So okay. Well,
there's some really good music that year.
Well, cheers, everybody. That is this episode of Toasting the Classics, and we have toasted yet another classic because we are the experts when it comes to this stuff.
That's right. on music, on film, on stand-up comedy,
comic books, graphic novels,
literature,
the
classics, the classical canon, Cicero and whatnot.
We span all genres.
We span everything. If you don't know anything about anything, come to us.
That's right. For Toasting the Classics, I am Clint Lanier.
And this is Dave McArthur. And I do want to give a shout out to the liquor store on my block. The guy gave me his card, and he said he was going to listen to the show. So I want to give a shout out to Adel Wine and Liquors on Columbus Avenue here in New York. Great place. The guy tipped me off to some good drinks sometimes. Yeah, thanks a lot for listening to our show. Peace out.
Peace out, everybody. Bye.
That's it for episode 80 of Toasting the Classics. As an update, I'd like to let you all know that the Cure concert was terrific. Yes, the band is older, but Robert Smith's voice is still powerful and the songs are as evocative as ever. A Forest is a great live moment, and I recommend it to anyone who has the means. For those playing along at home, I think you can guess what we'll be drinking when we discuss Ian Fleming's spy thriller Dr. No. If you'd like to get in touch, please send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Send us show ideas, comments, complaints, and any parody ideas we can steal and market in our own names. Check out my blog at theattractivenuisance.com and follow us on Twitter at @ractivenuisance. Our music was written by Michelle McArthur. See you next time on Toasting the Classics.